Square Ball Podcast.
Well, hello there. Welcome back. Happy New Year, Phil Hay. Dan here with Michael from the Square Ball. Phil Hay from The Athletic. You all right?
Not bad, thank you. Happy New Year to you as well.
Thank you very much. Show is brought to you with West Yorkshire Electrical.
Goodness, so it is. We just recorded the match ball about half an hour ago, so I'm all thrown. Should do this on a Monday. Yes, they do things with wires in, don't they?
Yeah. If it's got wires in it, they'll work with it.
That's
obviously fully accredited electrician with a full range of services.
Yep.
What's your favourite ones, apart from the ones that have been done on your house?
Battery storage, the green ones. Solar panels. Battery storage for the solar panels.
Yeah.
Car chargers that can connect to your solar panels.
And your battery.
Yeah, that all works as one thing.
Yeah. Are you a fan of CCTV, LED, lighting design and installation for business?
Yeah.
Test and inspection work, all fans like that?
Yeah.
Fire alarm systems?
They're all good. You need those things, don't you?
Yeah. Work for your home and your business. You can get finance available for your work on your home and your business. wyelectrical.co.uk for details, or have a look for West Yorkshire Electrical on your socials. Right, down to business then. This is the Christmas review. And Phil, we are recording straight off the back of the Birmingham game, but I thought we'd take a sort of a broader overview of what's happened over the Christmas period, because the last time we recorded was heading into Ipswich. So we've bookended the Christmas period, New Year period, with two really good solid wins. Ipswich in particular was great. The middle, not so great. Where do you want to start with it?
That was only like 10 days ago, the last show that we did. There's quite a lot going on in that period, to say the least. I don't know. You tell me, really. I think the thing...
Well, I asked you because I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. The thing that jumped out most, I think, from this Christmas period was the griping and the sort of disgruntlement after the West Brom defeat, which I think actually Farke was pretty aware of. Listening to him speak afterwards, I think he knew.
Can you remember what he said, Michael?
No, I can't remember anything.
It's like the live podcast revisited, never to be spoken about again. He was, afterwards, I think he realised that some of what had gone on at West Brom was pretty similar and pretty familiar in comparison to other away defeats, of which Leeds have had, quite a few this season.
Too many?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, no, they have. And have also lost in quite, I guess, repetitive fashion. There is a definite issue away from home against the low block. And you do, if you start to cut through the numbers, you do see, and it stands to reason because teams don't tend to be as dominant away from home as they are at home, but you do see a definite difference in things like your shots on goal, shots on target, your XG and everything else. And between, the results themselves and this thing that quite often happens where Leeds start fairly strongly, which I think they did at West Brom, but then they concede and they can't really get back into the game. And the method to get back into the game of so many attacking players in a system which sometimes looks a bit confused to me, I think it definitely seemed to generate a lot of frustration at the end of the game at the Hawthorns, and more than I expected. But the win over Ipswich was really, really impressive. They were too strong for Birmingham today. I don't know what on earth is going on at Birmingham. I mean, they just seem completely lost in the woods, them. They don't seem anything like as organised as they were under Eustace when Leeds played down there in August, and I didn't think on that day they looked like a particularly great side, but they look better than they did today.
Is it, Phil, because they've just appointed a really shit manager?
Well, you see, this is the thing, and I don't know how much people would want to hear us talk about Birmingham, but in situations like this, from a supporter's point of view, this is where you need really good communication from the club, because you need to understand whether or not, from their perspective, they think Rooney's doing a poor job and it's down to him. Have they taken the attitude that the squad just isn't good enough and they're going to stick with it and suck it up, and this starts for real in the summer? Is it a mixture of both? I think as a supporter, there's not an awful lot more frustrating than feeling like a decision that's been made, or experiment, if you want to call it that, feels like it's going badly wrong, but it's been allowed to persist. And there were chants against Rooney from the away end today, which is not a surprise, because there's only so long that the form can be as bad as it's been under him before people start to say, well, irrespective of whether there's a grander plan here and whether this is going to come good further down the line, it doesn't look like it's going to come good further down the line, and it doesn't feel good at the moment. They look really powder puff. They don't seem to have patterns of play. They don't seem to have much of a plan, much of a strategy. He said they were trying to hit Leeds in transition, which they did to a point, but really had very little in the final third. And in the end, Leeds were just too strong for them, too good. It's another really, really decent result at home, of which Leeds have had loads. And if in any way away from home they were as consistent or close to being this consistent, then they would be far better off in the table, wouldn't they?
I think they should give Rooney the season, and do you know why?
Why?
Funny.
Yeah.
Amusing.
I'd just like to say their Twitter account at BCFC, the bio underneath, it says Birmingham full stop, on the rise again full stop. And they changed that. I think it was about the time when they beat us at the start of the season and then sacked Eustace and then appointed Wayne Rooney. So
does it still say that? Or have they...
It does. At the time of recording, which is 7 p.m. on January the 1st, it says on the rise again, which I think I said they put that in when they were about 6th or 7th in the league. And they're now, I think, if memory serves
20th.
Let me just flick across. Yeah, 20th in the league table.
Wow. They've done this before, haven't they, when they got Zola in instead of Rowett when he was doing quite well.
Yeah, I remember being at a press conference with Zola when Neil Moxley was from the Mirror was taking him on about, really, really bad run of results. And Zola did have this habit of kind of saying, I can't criticise the players, I can't be unhappy with a lot of this, to which I think the point was made that, well, eventually you've got to be slightly unhappy with it, haven't you? If it's not working. I don't think they're totally deprived of good players, Birmingham, at all. There's some decent players in that squad, but there's not really any structure. And I think while there's been a debate around Farke, perhaps about whether there's enough variety in the play, whether Plan A works enough, particularly away from home, and I think also whether Plan B, your sort of 5-6 up front, is a good strategy to use. There's no doubt at all that there is at least a structure to the team that works more often than not and has worked pretty well so far. I think they're not in a bad position in the league at all. I think it seemed to me that the reason that there was a bit of kind of gnashing of teeth after West Brom, because it felt like you'd seen that game before.
Yeah.
And today we did see a different plan, didn't we?
Well, absolutely. And
well, can I ask the question that I've got in my mind and I've just jotted down, is that you're talking about the low block before, Phil, which is, basically, as in old language, teams defending deep, camps on the edge of their area. Do you think today's lineup changes, having Bamford leading the line, Rutter tucked in behind him, and we didn't actually get around to speaking specifically about this point on the match ball, which I'm glad about because it means we're not doubling up. Do you think he's trying to find a plan C there? Is this finding a new way to beat teams away from home?
Possibly, and I suppose we'll find out soon enough. I mean, at home is a different scenario, isn't it? And given that that's win number 9 of the season, you can hardly say that they've been grasping around trying to make it work up until this point. They've been, it's one of only about 5 or 6 unbeaten records in the top 4 divisions at home at the moment. 2 things really. One is that by moving Rutter into 10 and playing Bamford at 9, given that the normal structure is Pirro at 10 and Rutter at 9, and I know it is very fluid and very interchangeable, but that is how it's set up. It tells you, I think, that given that is Farke's policy, that he sees far more of an out-and-out 9 in Bamford than he does in Pirro. And for all the criticism of Bamford, and there's been loads, particularly of his finishing, I think, more than anything, he is a 9. Everything he does is centre-forward play. The trying to shift centre-backs around, running into gaps, creating options, looking for balls into the box. That's what he does. And I think you would never define him as anything other than a number 9, I don't think. The problem with him has always been that he does miss chances. His XG is never matched up with the number of goals that he scores. And I think more latterly as well, and there has been mitigation for this because he has had a lot of injuries, but he's found it hard to make any meaningful impact. But I did ask Farke after the game, is Bamford the sort of player who's more likely to shape and influence a game starting as opposed to coming off the bench? Like if you think about Nketiah, for example, under Bielsa, Nketiah did that thing where he would come on and score, with his first chance or, one of the first chances that came to him, and he was a real impact player in those circumstances. I don't think you really see that with Bamford, but I do think that when Bamford plays up front and when he's in form, he can build a game for you. And I thought he did that today. I thought he played really well. Mm-hmm. Even before the goal, I thought his movement and his runs were at least asking questions of the Birmingham defence. And I mean, looking back, that's his first goal in a league win for Leeds since May 2021, which is like 30 odd months ago. It's been such a long stretch. That isn't entirely his fault. You have to say that. Like, he has had injuries and he hasn't had a run where he's played a lot of games, started a lot of games where he's been fit since that season where he got himself into the England squad. But there's always, there has been for a good while now, this weird relationship between him and the crowd where they almost seem to need reminded from time to time that there have been good times, and this has been good for both. It's been good for the club having Bamford there in moments. It's been good for Bamford being at Leeds in moments. And there's a good amount of appreciation, I thought, for him today, which was right and was fair enough, because I think his performance was a big part of making that happen today. By no means the only player who played well, but he was good.
Yeah, he was good, and it was reflected in the crowd. And while the crowd has sometimes nibbled at him a little bit, and he's nibbled back, it's felt, there was I think there's a bit of a mutual appreciation there today. I wonder as well what kind of jumped out at me more recently, but I've kind of formed this opinion over the time that Bamford's been here, is that I wonder if maybe it's because he's not from number 9 stock traditionally. He's quite lanky and thin, isn't he? And maybe that's why, because his finishing has never been that of a number 9, really. He was always like a second striker, wasn't he, at Middlesbrough, or drifted in from out wide. He
tended to play wide, yeah.
And do you think that's maybe been reflected in his finishing, apart from that one real hot streak that he had?
Well, you would suspect that his games had to change over the years. Karanka played him a lot on the right, or I'd have to look back now, but I think as part of a 3, but certainly quite a wide role, so that Bamford could cut inside and shoot with his left foot, and he got a lot of goals for Middlesbrough. He was really impressive there. That and the earlier part of his career at Leeds are really the 2 points of his entire career that have jumped out as being successful for him. But there does come a time, doesn't there, where you need to start scoring again. I mean, for all that he had, he was a big part of the promotion year under Bielsa, and then obviously scored a lot of goals in the Premier League the following season. But that's quite a lot. That and his England appearance, which I don't think is going to be repeated now, it's all a long way behind him and the club. A lot of water has gone under the bridge. And because, Farke decided that Bamford was going to be part of the squad this season, at some point you need him to be chipping in. You need goals and you need assists, or you need influential performances, because it can't just rest on a small group of players. You get promoted basically by the players you use most being ultra reliable and very, very good, but those round about them making key contributions as well. And that was one today, plus a little bit from Firpo too.
Yes, he was good as junior, wasn't he?
Well, he was good going forward. I mean, there was that moment in the second half where you thought it was all going to be undone as that pass went in behind him. But 2 assists. I mean, it was a day when a lot of people needed to step up today. Klaassen in goal, Costello wasn't available, and Melier is banned. Klaassen did well. Again, didn't look rattled particularly in goal. I think a good game for him to come in, and probably the right game at the right time for Leeds all round.
Fan of the hair?
Well, I would if I could. Put that way, yeah. I've written about Bamford's hair actually, because I still think the most surreal moment of the season so far was that point where he pulled his beanie off, and the entire crowd just had an intake of breath. Even though, weird and wonderful haircuts are kind of pedestrian in football, aren't they? That's just part of the game. There was that thing of quite surprised Bamford would do that.
I mean, given his flip flopping form, is it fair to say, will the real Pat Bamford please stand up?
Yeah, well, I did use some Eminem references. You'd be surprised, thieved from other people. Yeah, but everybody's at it. But it can't be a bad thing for him to be in a bit of form, can it? He gets into form. It actually gives you the options of rotating it, where you think that whoever you're picking might do something for you. And I do think Pirro had been very, very quiet in the last couple of games as well.
Yeah. Overall shape of the table, just looking at it now, we are 7 points adrift of Ipswich in second. Obviously, you've got the hot streak from Southampton at the minute. They're on generational form at the minute, as it stands. Just looking at the other playoff places are currently occupied by Southampton, West Brom, and Sunderland, all of whom have beaten us this season.
Yeah. Yeah, and likewise, you've got Ipswich and Leicester, top two, who Leeds have taken 9 points from. Yeah. There was part of me thinking, that Ipswich would be absolutely delighted to get out of this period with, a 7-point lead or something like that, having been thrashed at Ellen Road. But now you come to reflect on it, Farke's probably quite happy that the gap is only 7 points, given that they, picked up nothing from Preston and nothing from West Brom. A long way to go. Long way to go. It feels like quite a reach to see Leeds finish in top 2, I have to say. But it isn't wrapping itself up, with the exception of Leicester, who just look like they've gone completely.
See, I mean, just seeing this win, I'm on to go, come on, Phil, show some faith. Whereas I will admit,
have you of all people saying
a day or two ago, I was going, look at getting the playoffs there. Knackered this, finished 10th.
What do you make? There were a few little rumblings of Farke out, which seems like madness given the short-termism that overtook the club last season and the chaos that kind of followed from constant change and churn.
I think you just have to be kind of fair and reasonable about it, and say that there are points, and I think Farke was reached one on Friday night at West Brom, where as a coach, you have to show that you can deal with problems that arise, that you've got the wit and the nous to address issues with the team. And, if 6 away defeats becomes 10 away defeats, then that's almost certainly far too much to get into the top 2. And that is what you're going to look back on at the end of the season and say that really compromised us and you weren't able to fix it. Although, obviously, you do have the playoffs to potentially take you up too. And that's, always good for Leeds, isn't it? Because it's always how it works out. But yeah, so Farke out, I think, is not to say that everything he's done has been perfect and that tactically everything is working, but it does seem to me to kind of, I guess, undervalue some of the form this season and some of the results. And to judge by the strongest squads in the division, I think the two that probably are as strong, if not stronger, would be Leicester and Southampton. And they are two of the 3 clubs who are above them. It's not as if Leeds are down in 9th or trailing behind sides where you would say, well, there's simply no excuse for being behind them. Ipswich, it runs kind of counter to that argument, but Ipswich's points tally is so, impressive and so good that you have to hold your hands up a little bit to that. So it's not that Farke gets a free pass when it goes like it goes at West Brom, and when you've seen that, things that haven't worked before not work again, then you do kind of ask the question, well, presumably that has to be fixed. But you're right, it seemed a bit over the top to me Friday night. Do you
think that's still because there's a bit of hangover from relegation, the anxiety attached to relegation and trying to get back up there and the feeling that we have to get back up there this time or we lose this player?
I think part of it will be people looking at things that are going wrong and making legitimate criticisms of that when that happens. Part of it is also this inherent thing, I think, in football where you're more inclined to lean towards the negative, aren't you? It's like it's the kind of default setting for a lot of supporters, and I'm probably the same. When it comes to Hearts, when you hit a bad period, that's when you think, right, okay, well, we're seeing the team as they actually are now. This is the true picture of what's going on. This is the rest of it's all been.
It's been a lie, a mirage.
People winging it, But the reality of the Championship, and I've seen this so many times, is that you can't wing it in the Championship for very long. You don't get far in the division by just sort of. Chancing your arm and hoping that it all works out. I think Farke has done a good job. I'd never forget that the summer was really difficult. But this sort of thing teaches you what it is to manage Leeds, which is that you will have demands around you, and they will be pretty strenuous. And
we've always said it's a heavy shirt to wear, but it's also it's a heavy trench coat to wear on the touchline.
Yes, depending on or tracksuit, depending on what what your clothing of choice is. But no, it absolutely is, and I think Farke will know that. He can say, he can argue the toss about top 6 being decent this season, considering how everything was set up at the very, very start. But he also knows that if you're a coach of Leeds in the Championship, there's quite a small window in which you've got to deliver promotion, particularly if people think you've got a good team and a good squad, which he has.
What he's got is he's got a good budget, hasn't he? That's one of the things I think that fuels a lot of this is the money, the parachute payments.
And there's no point in pretending, however difficult the summer was, that he doesn't have a big budget and that he doesn't have players that other clubs would happily take any day of the week.
Well, what do you think to the accusation that he should do better with the resources that he's got, or do you think we're about on par for where we should be given the summer? And
I feel like they're on par personally. Not a mile off 2 points a game. The squad, I think, is good once you start to get into the further reaches of it. I think you do. I think the best starting lineup as it is definitely stronger than some of what lies underneath it. I would find it. I think because Leicester and Ipswich have been so good, there's a tendency, isn't there, to say that's what Leeds should be doing as well. But it's asking a lot, and as I say, it doesn't equate to a free pass. But I do think as the first half of the season tends to go, it's been pretty good.
Yeah.
My hope is that across the season, with talk of the budget there, is that actually it just turns out to be a really boring season where the 3 teams with the biggest budget go up, and the sheer volume of resource behind us, Southampton and Leicester, means that we'll bully our way out of this division, all 3 of us.
Yeah.
And I'm absolutely fine with that, even though it kind of ruins the division.
Out of interest, though, do you look at any of the top 4? Have you seen them play and go through their squads? Do you think any of them are particularly set up for the Premier League?
No, but
I agree.
I think we're in a weird hinterland where we're probably on balance too good for this division, which is a careful. I've got to be careful about how you say that.
Yeah.
But in terms of the overall standard of the division and what you see from most clubs most weeks, is I think on balance we're far superior to that. You could say the same of the others in the top four. Ipswich are the sort of outlier, aren't they? Because they're carrying momentum from promotion, and you wonder, can they sustain it? That's been asked all season so far. They're just about hanging in there, although they have wobbled a little bit in the last sort of 4 or 5 games, haven't they? No is the answer. But then again, I expect if and when we do get out of this division, whether it's this attempt or next season or whenever, that the squad that we go into the Premier League with will have a certain amount of change there. I think in all major positions, I think you're likely to see quite a lot of churn.
Yeah, I think so, and I don't think that just applies to Leeds. I almost feel now like any club coming up from the Championship is going to have very little option but to make major change to the squad if they want to stay up, mainly because there are a hell of a lot of players who fall into exactly that grey area you were talking about, of clearly good enough for the Championship and most likely good enough to get out of the Championship, but still, unproven to a point, or question marks over them when it comes to whether they're good enough for the Premier League. But I guess that's a bit of a concern for another day.
I was going to say, the other side to this is that we've complained that Leeds United were often looking steps further down the road than they should have done. Should have concentrated on the here and now, and the here and now is get out of this division now. Just going back to the Farke question, another point I just wanted to touch on and get your opinion on is that there have been accusations about the style of play being too slow or boring. What do you make of that? I mean, I look at like Leicester, who almost possession their way to death in this division, don't they? Southampton are quite possession-based as well.
They do.
What do you think?
But I think if you're winning as many games as Leicester are, it becomes nigh on impossible to pick serious fault. At that point, you can try, but really the numbers speak for themselves. I don't think I wouldn't describe it as boring at all. There are periods of the games where it seems to meander slightly because it is, back and forward, although that's the adopted style, and particularly Ellen Road, it works more often than not. I think when you get into a bit of an ordeal like the second half at West Brom, where it honestly did feel like that could have gone on for any length of time and there was never going to be a goal at the end of it, then you're looking for something else, aren't you? And one of my observations from West Brom was that, considering the number of attacking players on the pitch and the way that you wanted it to go, there seemed to be like an inordinate amount of time spent on the halfway line with the ball going back and forward. And I think that's probably the night where it looked most confused, if that makes sense, that you had all these players there, but it wasn't totally clear who was supposed to be doing what. And it wasn't totally clear that the players understood how it was going to. I don't mean they won't have practiced that routine and they won't understand the system, but I don't think, given that West Brom dropped so deep, I don't think the odds of that working were particularly good.
All in all then, what do you see when you look at Leeds United now heading into the new year? 26 games played, 48 points on the board.
I think they're as in the running as they've been at any stage, really. They haven't. There hasn't been a stage this season where any of us have sat and said, right, the top two is definitely on. There've been points at which it's turned to the extent where it makes you think, okay, well, this could be where the impetus really starts to swing, and then it doesn't. I think they're in a good place. I think they're in good shape. I think they're very much set up to finish top 6. I think they do still need to be careful in certain positions. I'm not sure how long. To be fair to Klaassen, he did fine today, and he there's no denying that at all. But there'll be far more difficult games against far better attacks than Birmingham's this afternoon. And the injuries are just starting to creep in a bit for Byram now, aren't they? At left back, there've been a few.
What was my message to you? I mean, we've abandoned it.
Yes.
Yeah, the 20-minute text is dead.
Yeah, it's gone. But the 50-minute text was sign a left back.
Yeah,
yes.
Which was the moment at which Byram was on the floor holding his hammy.
So they're not totally sure. I mean, it's straight after the game, so they haven't had a chance to assess him. But it is a hamstring problem. Farke's just waiting to find out what's going on. No Darlow today because of a dislocated finger, which Farke was saying he actually did in the warm up at West Brom. Basically, just strapped it up, gave him a load of painkillers, and he cracked on. But again. And Meslier will be back. He's getting through his suspension now. But I think even more so than the actual defeat at Preston itself, the sort of stupidity of Meslier doing what he did, and I don't think that's the worst offence I've ever seen, but you're kind of asking for it, is kind of laid bare, because goalkeepers are hard to replace. Like, it's not like outfield where you can kind of negate one position by other players around about playing well. You need a good and reliable keeper. I don't think you'd want Klaassen in there for any great length of time at the moment. But Melia will be back quite soon.
Does Melia's ban get eaten away by the FA Cup as well?
I believe so, yes.
Yes, that's what that counts for it.
Oh, so that's not too bad then, is it?
No, as far as I'm aware, I was under the impression that that's the case, although I should probably check. Yeah.
Fact checking, a journalist it'll never catch on. We're going to preview the FA Cup game. But let's just look a little bit further ahead, if we could. We're going to preview that in a separate show that's coming out later in the week, I was going to say. Just looking further ahead, next couple of fixtures, bizarrely, we've got Preston again as the next home game, having only just faced them. Cardiff away, and then Norwich at home, Bristol away, looking at them Rotherham, who are bottom. So you've got a series of games there where you're looking again to take the majority of points out of these, aren't you?
Some long trips coming up as well. Bristol, Cardiff, Plymouth, Swansea. Yeah. This is where it counts, isn't it? This is where you've got to keep it ticking over. I've said this a few times this season, but it's like the part of a race where you just got your head down and you keep going. And I remember writing at the start of December and saying, even if they pick up plenty of points, they won't play well all the way through this period. Leeds, it's impossible. You're always going to have games where it does become a slog and you don't feel like you're properly on it. I think on reflection, Farke would have wanted a better Christmas than this. I think 2 defeats and 2 wins is par, shall we say that? But I think he would have expected them to have got more out of West Brom and Preston back to back. But all in all, this win over Birmingham does kind of alleviate some of the damage.
Nice one, Phil. Well, we will record for a show that's going to come out later in the week as well. We're going to preview Peterborough in that one and the Mammoth FA Cup run. So we'll catch you on that.
Yes, look forward to it.
The Square Ball Podcast.